My guest is Dr. Mike Hannahan. He is director of the University of Massachusetts Civic Initiative. He's been a political consultant. You were communications director to former Governor Jane Swift. You've been with us many times on our political roundtables, and we always introduce you as director of Civic Initiative at UMass. We've never explained it. The organization is coming up on its 10th anniversary. There's an April 11th event at UMass to mark that anniversary. And in fact, what is the University of Massachusetts Civic Initiative?
Well, as you said, Jim, we started 10 years ago, and we've become an organization that does what I would call democracy education at home and abroad. And many of our programs are actually involved with international visitors, so we tend to bring groups of students, professors, teachers, whatever the content can vary, to the United States for 4 to 6 week programs, and then we often tend to go to those countries and do follow-up programs.
I know you gave me a great phrase when we were talking about how to talk about this, and you said, it's soft diplomacy.
Well, the word soft diplomacy in the field can have a lot of different meanings. From my perspective, there's a feeling that just having people come to the U.S., having honest conversations with Americans, and then having us go to their countries and having conversations with people there, it has a lot of meaning. I think it has two. One is it opens up people's eyes to the way the country really is, for its good and bad. But I think even more, they build their own networks within the country of people who are experienced with each other. So people in Iraq or Pakistan, they don't always meet each other. They don't, between ethnicity and religion, they tend to form their own groups within the country. They call each other on the phone, they have problems, they solve them. As that goes forward in the future, that's a beneficial thing.
I mean, the kind of people you have involved here at UMass, your Civic Initiative fellows are largely political science people interested in government, future leaders, and many times the people from around the world who either come or you go to visit also are potentially, if not already to some extent, leaders in their country. I mean, you're really, as you say, you're really making network connections conceivably for the future for decades to come.
Yeah, just to take a step back, when you mention the word Civic Fellows, that involves University of Massachusetts students who work for us in the summer, and they live with the participants, and they drive them, they're friends with them, they go to class with them, they talk to them late into the evening, the kind of things that people the same age would do that, I wouldn't necessarily participate in. And it's a pretty big, I think, a big experience for them in their lives. I was just in D.C., I just came back, and I met one of our former fellows. He now works for the State Department. Another one works for World Learning. Another one works for Chemonics. These are all firms that do this kind of work. But, we can talk in the classroom about Pakistan or Iraq, but it means a lot more, I think, for the students to actually meet and talk face-to-face over time. And that's a big part of the program.
A big part of it, too, it struck me, and you were kind enough 3 or 4 years back to invite me to meet with a group you had. If I remember right, a lot of them were Fulbright scholars, I think.
It was Argentina.
From Argentina. Yeah. They were fascinating to spend a couple of hours with. And the thing that strikes me is everybody around the world knows something about the United States. Now, granted, they may be ill-conceived, preconceived notions of the giant superpower, but still, they know something about us. Most Americans can't tell you the name of the Canadian Prime Minister or the President of Mexico, our nearest neighbors. How does this broaden our perspective? Because that's so important, it seems to me.
Well, you've really hit a very important gap. And you use the example of Argentina. It's even wider in Pakistan. And the gap is that everybody knows something about the United States and Pakistan, but often they're wrong. Whereas people in the United States don't know anything at all about Pakistan. And so getting a chance to meet the students, go to dinner with them, they get a chance to speak to groups, et cetera, it makes an enormous difference. Just a little bit of knowledge is sort of a gee whiz moment. Oh, they go to school. I mean, little silly things like that, it has a big impact.
Correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I know you've spent a lot of time working with people from some of the former Soviet republics, Georgia, I think, and Azerbaijan. You've spent time in Iraq, I know. You spent a semester in Argentina. You had recently, I think, a reunion with a large number of Iraqi alumni of the Civic Initiative program. It strikes me that country in particular, the U.S. history of the last 20 years or so with Iraq, that's got to be really important because they've got all kinds of ideas about who we are, and they've been on the receiving end of some of who the United States is militarily and diplomatically. That's got to be a critical connection to make.
It is. To some extent, the people in Iraq are dealing with their own issues now, and the United States is a player, but for the most part, the players are Iraqi or Middle Eastern, at this point. But it still is very important for the students, as much as they dislike or like American policy, mostly it's dislike, to get a chance to see the country itself. And for Americans to go there. I've taken Americans to Iraq and to Pakistan to get a chance to talk to students there. And I think it's important for them to see we're willing to go there, as well as them having an opportunity to come to the U.S.
One of the things that was fascinating for me when I met with your Argentinian group a few years back, one of the things they wanted to know about, and it was very much in the news then, was American exceptionalism. It was being talked a lot about. We were leading up to I guess it was the 2012 presidential campaign. They were talking a lot about Mitt Romney. The fact that I'd met and interviewed him, they were fascinated by. But they wanted to know what I thought of the idea of American exceptionalism. And I wanted to ask them about, well, don't you think your country, Argentina, is exceptional? Right. And they looked at me then like I was from the moon. This is something different. Americans, a feeling Americans have versus people around the world about even their own country in a lot of cases.
But I think factually America is exceptional in a narrow sense, that it's a very powerful nation that has a foreign policy that affects more countries than most other countries' foreign policy affects. But nonetheless, I think you have a point that most people underestimate the extent of their own nationalism. The Argentinian soccer team plays in a game, every house in Argentina pulls the flag out. And the Argentinians love their country, just like people in Iraq like their country, or people in Pakistan like their country. So the exceptionalism is not that interesting. I mean, we're a big country who's very powerful. I think everybody would acknowledge that, for good or bad. It's just not that interesting, I think, in a lot of ways.
You've got a group of UMass students going to Pakistan. If I remember right, it's the first U.S. student group to visit Pakistan, part of a government program, in 16 years. I mean, that to me is telling in itself the kind of links you make that aren't made very often.
Yes, we did have in April, in the past. And it was a very exciting trip, because the students not only met with their Pakistani alumni, but kids from India were there, kids from Afghanistan. There's about 400 people at this event. And they got a chance to visit a hospital, they got a chance to tour around some, and see a little bit of the life of their friends who they meet and spend time with in the United States. It sort of completed the circle in many ways.
10 years in now to the program, and 10 years of making connections, as you call the 10th anniversary event. What do you look for in the years to come? Do you keep building? Does it grow? Do you refine what you're doing? What are the thoughts?
I'd like to continue the programs, but I think it would be good to build alumni networks as well. I think in the future, what the dream is, a bunch of these kids are 20 years old, 22 years old. When they're 40, they call each other for help in their own country, and they form a network of people with a common experience who get into mid and high level positions in business, medicine, government, and they begin to help each other out. And I think that's a vision that I would personally like to pursue, to keep that network together. And that takes work and communications, but it can be done.
And not to oversimplify, but real quickly with about 20 seconds left, it's a lot harder to dislike intensely or hate somebody if you've shared a meal with them, if you know them face to face, isn't it?
Well, you don't have to agree with them, and I always say that when I write a grant or talk. You don't have to agree with someone, but understanding is the first step.
Well, Mike Hannahan, Director of the University of Massachusetts Civic Initiative, thanks for being our guest, sir.
Thanks for having me.